From pre-election warnings of a national unity crisis to the former PM post-politics, weighing the fate of an iconic retailer, the buzz over an Alberta beer tax, and where our province ranks in UFO sightings. Our Primetime This Week panel is in. And joining us this evening, Ellen Parker, founder and CEO of Parker PR in Calgary, and Tyler Dawson, Alberta correspondent for the National Post. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the looming federal election and the debate it's triggering in our province.
Top standards, play like a team. It's a huge, it's a lesson for all of us, right? Lesson for me, lesson for the country. It's great.
New Prime Minister Mark Carney there on Thursday taking in a pregame skate with the Oilers after meeting with Premier Smith behind closed doors, an encounter one political analyst says must have been intense.
She's made it crystal clear that she's a political opponent of Mark Carney's, that she opposes the re-election of the Liberal government, and that she'll do everything she can, fighting tooth and nail against their efforts.
The Premier issued a statement post-meeting writing, "We had a very frank discussion in which I made it clear that Albertans will no longer tolerate the way we've been treated by the federal Liberals over the past 10 years, and included a list of demands to be addressed or risk a national unity crisis."
You know, some of the demands actually make a ton of sense, but you don't state them as demands, otherwise I will force a national unity crisis.
There is no question that Mr. Carney is set against the oil and gas industry and will do everything in his power to shut it down.
Now, Mark Carney is expected to trigger the federal election on Sunday. Ellen, what do you make of this first encounter between the Premier and the new PM and the Alberta government's warnings of a national unity crisis? That national unity is at stake with the outcome of this election.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely her approach was confrontational. I think maybe it could have been softer. I do agree with what she's saying myself. I think Alberta is sort of disproportionately impacted by these policies from the federal government. You know, Bill C-69, I believe, is something that needs to be repealed, and even looking at what's happening south of the border in our markets and moving our products across the country. This is a federal constitution, I believe. So I feel like she's coming in strong. I don't believe that there's going to be a successful referendum if we've gotten there yet, but I do think that she's coming in strong.
Tyler, what do you see riding on this election where Alberta is concerned and this reference to an unprecedented national unity crisis?
I do think the unprecedented in there is doing quite a bit of work. I mean, pretty much anything you can imagine has some precedent in Canada. I mean, we'd armed rebellion in 1867, and we had a Quebec secession referendum in 1995. So what could possibly constitute unprecedented, other than the fact maybe that it would be Alberta and not Quebec or Manitoba that are sort of up in arms, literally or figuratively, this time. So I do question what exactly the Premier envisions this national unity crisis being, because those are historically it's a historically loaded way to frame it. As you know, as for what is riding on it for Alberta, fundamentally it's how much representation we're going to have in Parliament. If the Liberals win, how many seats are we going to have? Are we going to have any people around the cabinet table? If the Conservatives win, you know, there's a good chance probably we'll have 30, 35 people to choose from. So, you know, either way, we'll get some representation.
Ellen, you mentioned referendum a moment ago. How do you weigh the prospect of there being a referendum on secession in Alberta's future?
I don't think it will be successful, but I do believe that we are facing a time now where it's very divisive and people are very frustrated, and Alberta is very frustrated. So I think people have concerns looking at federal policies that haven't been very economically successful for the past decade.
All right. Well, as the federal political landscape gears up for an election call, the former Prime Minister settling into life as a, shall we call it a political retiree, Justin Trudeau's first post on social media since Mark Carney's takeover of the Liberal Party featured a photo of the former PM shopping with a caption, "Gotta love a Monday morning at Canadian Tire." And based on the shopping cart, it appears he was picking up kitchen supplies. So, Tyler, does this mean former prime ministers are just like the rest of us?
Well, former prime ministers don't generally, or regular Canadians don't generally need to put their Instagram posts in both official languages. So there's one difference right there. I think to some extent politicians are all normal people in their personal lives. In my experience, having met some of them sort of, outside of the legislature or parliament, or in their normal life, they are all mostly relatively normal. But you have to imagine that Justin Trudeau doesn't have anything to go in a kitchen at this point, whereas the rest of us have been collecting it for a couple decades at this point. I mean, he's lived in government housing basically for the last decade or longer, perhaps. So yeah, he probably does need a blender and a toaster.
Yeah, he has some catching up to do. Ellen, there's been past chatter of another former PM popping into an Alberta Costco for a hot dog. How do you think you'd respond to encountering the likes of a Justin Trudeau or a Stephen Harper while out and about?
Well, I think it would be interesting, of course. I think that your first post online after being the Prime Minister of Canada, I think I would want to be doing something a little bit more inspiring if I'm posting it, like volunteering or, supporting animals, doing something in the community. I thought that was a little bit I don't know. I didn't think it was great, that particular post.
Tyler, would you stop for a chat? Were you to trip over a former Prime Minister?
It would depend who it was. It would depend if it was someone I thought who might know who I am. I mean, if it was Trudeau, I certainly don't think he'd have any idea who I am, so I'd just be another person bothering him while he's out and about, so I probably wouldn't. I'd maybe go say hi to Jason Kenney or Rachel Notley, though. They might recognize me, so I wouldn't feel like I was intruding on their time quite so much in that case.
Oh, indeed. Okay. All right. Time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the Bay's struggle to stay above water, beer tax blues, and Alberta eyes on the sky. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. We heard from retail expert Heather Thompson of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce off the top this evening on Canada's oldest retailer, the Hudson's Bay Company, now headed to liquidation, just 6 stores being saved for the time being. As we heard, the company back in court earlier today. Now, Ellen, you're a business owner. How do you feel about the Bay disappearing from the retail landscape? How big of a loss could that represent?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of our times. Honestly, it's a sign of our economic times here. I know the Bay was, I believe, purchased in 2008 by a U.S. private equity firm. And they didn't sort of adapt to the new landscape of folks who are making most of the purchases, which are the younger demographic. I know that, I think, the Bay has a lot of kind of history here within our country and the blanket and nostalgia around it. And it's unfortunate, but again, it's what happens when our economy is the way it is right now.
Tyler, it's a sign of the times. Might this end up being a wake-up call of sorts for consumers to support Canadian, especially when the Trump tariffs dynamic still looms large?
I think Canadians are already pivoting to support Canadian. I mean, you've seen that in some of the polling data over the past couple of weeks. I suspect that looks a little bit more like supporting local, supporting small business, things like that, as opposed to going to a department store for your purchases. I mean, if you go to the Hudson's Bay store nearby to get jeans or something, you're going to end up probably buying a pair of Levi's that are an American company anyways, right? So I don't know even if this sort of patriotic pivot had happened at a different point, if that would have helped the Bay all that much. I do think sort of this department store model has been failing for a long time, and more niche stores in places that are more accessible to customers instead of taking up this massive real estate in a big mall that people have to go to. So I think it's a combination of factors, but maybe fundamentally just sort of the retail market changing underneath them.
Either of you planning to rush out, scoop up some Hudson's Bay merchandise, be that an iconic blanket, striped pair of socks? Ellen?
I hadn't planned on it, but I'm going to check on my points, because if I have some points still there, I'll go.
Yeah, you need to move quickly, as Heather Thompson was telling us earlier. When was the last time you were in a Bay store, Tyler?
Oh, gosh, I have no idea. When was the last time I was in a mall? I don't know. It's been a while. My main memory of the Bay is as a child going shopping with my mom and having to walk through that sort of gauntlet of perfume smells. That's sort of my core memory of the Bay, but I couldn't even tell you when I was last in one.
Yeah, that is a memory for a lot of us. Okay, still on the business front, buried in the details of Alberta's latest budget is a policy change that has some frothing.
Was of surprise.
Alberta's government, through the AGLC, changing its beer tax fee structure. It used to be that small brewers had to produce 400,000 hectoliters annually before being taxed upwards of $1.25 per liter. Now that volume has been cut by more than half. And while a majority of small brewers will pay 10% taxes, Calgary-based Big Rock, which pushes out 300 kegs a day, faces a big yearly markup.
$1 million of more tax that we will pay to the government of Alberta.
Others, though, call it a leveling of the playing field, giving small brewers a chance to better plan for higher production.
They have a much more gradual ramp off that allows brewers to plan for that as they got closer to that.
Now, in a statement, the province says the move will improve fairness across the board, ensuring benefits under small producer programs are doing what they're supposed to, supporting growth and investment. Tyler, what's your read on the necessity of this tax change and the motivation of the government to bring it forward?
It's probably fundamentally a revenue question. I mean, as I'm sure everyone knows, there was an income tax cut that was part of the provincial budget this year, and that leaves a pretty significant hole in the Alberta government's finances. We don't have a lot of levers that can be pulled to manage our revenue streams. You know, we've got the income tax, corporate and personal, and we've got royalty revenues and those resource royalty revenues, and those sort of bring in the bulk of the income to the government. And there's had to have been sort of as necessity, unless you want to start cutting things, other ways to make up these shortfalls. So that's why you've seen things like the electric vehicle tax coming in. That, I suspect, is why you've seen increases over the years on tobacco tax and alcohol tax. And governments love to turn to those things. They love to turn to fees that people might not notice. They love to turn to sin taxes on beverages and cigarettes to try and make up some more money. So, you know, I think there can be other motivations for it too, but it's hard to see this as anything other than looking to make more money.
And Alan, how much of an impact do you see this tax change having on Albertans' love of beer, craft breweries included?
Yeah, I think it's going to impact, especially the small batch brewers who may not necessarily now want to scale and grow into bigger businesses like Big Rock has done. And also our wine industry, like they're impacted as well. And we have so many boutique wine markets. We're not in a region here in Alberta and Canada where we can grow a lot of great wine. So we have lots of small family producers from around the world who showcase their wines here. And I think that's really unfortunate that that's going to be a more barrier to access point as well and impact the small boutique wine stores in Calgary.
The wine, good point on the wine as well. All right, one more topic. According to the National UFO Reporting Centre, more Albertans have spotted unidentified flying objects than most provinces. 1 in every 700 of us, to be exact. Only Ontario reports more per person, while Newfoundland and Labrador report the least. There have been 5 reported sightings so far this year, the most recent last month in Strathmore. An astrobiologist says there's no data to prove aliens exist, but she isn't ruling it out.
We've not found evidence of microbial life on another planet. We've not found signs of intelligent life on another planet. The only life we know, simple or complex, is on Earth. I think there's probably both out there.
Now, if there is, the invitation to visit is as close as the world's first UFO landing pad in St. Paul, right there in all its glory. Tyler, what's your pulse on why Alberta might be such a popular spot for spying visitors from beyond?
I think the simplest explanation is probably just that there's an airbase in Cold Lake and there's probably lots of drones and agricultural planes and stuff flying around that people mistake for UFOs. I think one could perhaps do a little bit of political analysis here, though, and say that there are segments of the Alberta population that lean in with some enthusiasm to sort of conspiracy theory type stuff. There's that lovely Flat Earth Conference sign on Highway 2 just south of Edmonton, and I imagine that plays a factor as well.
Ellen, Thursday was National Alien Abduction Day. As an Albertan, how worried are you about being scooped up by a UFO?
Well, you know, my dad was in a band all through the 80s and 90s called the Alien Rebels. And so we would actually drive around Alberta going into fields and try to spot UFOs. And so I think it's just really fun that this is happening. I think it's playful. I mean, obviously, people are looking up into the sky way more now than they probably were, you know, before all the drones and this kind of became popular. But so, no, I don't think I'm going to get scooped up, to answer your question. But yeah, I just think it's fun.
Yeah, I could see it doing a gig at the UFO landing pad in St. Paul. All right, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.